Chapter 2 of Book 1 of Les Misérables, Volume 4 by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Emma Joyce. Les Misérables, Volume 4 by Victor Hugo. Translated by Isabel Florence Hapgood. Book 1, A Few Pages of History. Chapter 2, Badly Sewed. But the task of sages is one thing, the task of clever men is another. The Revolution of 1830 came to a sudden halt. As soon as a revolution has made the coast, the skilful make haste to prepare the shipwreck. The skilful in our century have conferred on themselves the title of statesmen, so that this word, statesman, has ended by becoming somewhat of a slang word. It must be borne in mind, in fact, that wherever there is nothing but skill, there is necessarily pettiness. To say the skilful amounts to saying the mediocre. In the same way, to say statesmen is sometimes equivalent to saying traitors. If, then, we are to believe the skilful, revolutions like the Revolution of July are severed arteries, a prompt ligature is indispensable. The right, too grandly proclaimed, is shaken. Also, right once firmly fixed, the state must be strengthened. Liberty once assured, attention must be directed to power. Here the sages are not, as yet, separated from the skilful, but they begin to be distrustful. Power, very good, but in the first place, what is power? In the second, whence comes it? The skilful do not seem to hear the murmured objection, and they continue their maneuvers. According to the politicians, who are ingenious in putting the mask of necessity on profitable fictions, the first requirement of a people after a revolution, when this people forms part of a monarchical continent, is to procure for itself a dynasty. In this way, they say, peace, that is to say, time to dress our wounds and to repair the house, can be had after a revolution. The dynasty conceals the scaffolding and covers the ambulance. Now, it is not always easy to procure a dynasty. If it is absolutely necessary, the first man of genius or even the first man of fortune who comes to hand suffices for the manufacturing of a king. You have, in the first place, Napoleon, in the second, Iturbide. But the first family that comes to hand does not suffice to make a dynasty. There is necessarily required a certain modicum of antiquity in a race, and the wrinkle of the centuries cannot be improvised. If we place ourselves at the point of view of the statesman, after making all allowances, of course, after a revolution, what are the qualities of a king which result from it? He may be, and it is useful for him to be, a revolutionary, that is to say, a participant in his own person in that revolution, that he should have lent a hand to it, that he should have either compromised or distinguished himself therein, that he should have touched the axe or wielded the sword in it. What are the qualities of a dynasty? It should be national, that is to say, revolutionary at a distance, not through acts committed, but by reason of ideas accepted. It should be composed of past and be historic, be composed of future and be sympathetic. All this explains why the early revolutions contented themselves with finding a man, Cromwell or Napoleon, and why the second absolutely insisted on finding a family, the House of Brunswick or the House of Orleans. Royal houses resemble those Indian fig trees, each branch of which, bending over to the earth, takes root and becomes a fig tree itself. Each branch may become a dynasty, on the sole condition that it shall bend down to the people. Such is the theory of the skilful. Here, then, lies the great art, to make a little render to success the sound of a catastrophe, in order that those who profit by it may tremble from it also, to season with fear every step that is taken, to augment the curve of the transition to the point of retarding progress, to dull that aurora, to denounce and retrench the harshness of enthusiasm, to cut all angles and nails, to wad triumph, to muffle up right, to envelope the giant people in flannel and to put it to bed very speedily, to impose a diet on that excess of health, to put Hercules on the treatment of a convalescent, to dilute the event with the expedient, to offer to spirits thirsting for the ideal that nectar thinned out with a potion, to take one's precaution against too much success, to garnish the revolution with a shade. 1830 practiced this theory, already applied to England by 1688. 1830 is a revolution arrested midway, half of progress, quasi-right. Now logic knows not the almost, absolutely as the sun knows not the candle. Who arrests revolutions halfway? The bourgeoisie. Why? Because the bourgeoisie is interest which has reached satisfaction. Yesterday it was appetite, today it is plenitude, Tomorrow it will be satiety. The phenomenon of 1814 after Napoleon was reproduced in 1830 after Charles X. The attempt has been made, and wrongly, to make a class of the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie is simply the contented portion of the people. The bourgeois is the man who now has time to sit down. A chair is not a caste. But through a desire to sit down too soon one may arrest the very march of the human race. This has often been the fault of the bourgeoisie. One is not a class because one has committed a fault. Selfishness is not one of the divisions of the social order. Moreover, we must be just to selfishness. The state to which that part of the nation which is called the bourgeoisie aspired after the shock of 1830 was not the inertia which is complicated with indifference and laziness, and which contains a little shame. It was not the slumber which presupposes a momentary forgetfulness accessible to dreams. It was the halt. The halt is a word formed of a singular, double, and almost contradictory sense. A troop on the march, that is to say movement. A stand, that is to say repose. The halt is the restoration of forces. It is repose armed and on the alert. It is the accomplished fact which posts sentinels and holds itself on its guard. The halt presupposes the combat of yesterday and the combat of tomorrow. It is the partition between 1830 and 1848. What we here call combat may also be designated as progress. The bourgeoisie, then, as well as the statesmen, required a man who should express this word halt, and although because a composite individuality, signifying revolution and signifying stability, in other terms strengthening the present by the evident compatibility of the past with the future. This man was already found. His name was Louis Philippe d'Orléans. The 221 made Louis Philippe king. Lafayette undertook the coronation. He called it the best of republics. The town hall of Paris took the place of the cathedral of Rheims. This substitution of a half throne for a whole throne was the work of 1830. When the skilful had finished, the immense vice of their solution became apparent. All this had been accomplished outside the bounds of absolute right. Absolute right cried, "I protest!" Then, terrible to say, it retired into the darkness. End of Book 1, Chapter 2.